And so for 3 years she had to do that. So you can imagine the hours that she spent doing that. Can everybody hear me all right? Okay. Yeah, like I said, I was 3 years old before they were to operate. My mom kept me alive with Viagra for a minute. And guess where I was born at? In the garden. My mother was hoeing the garden the second day of June and I fell out. So they went and got a 8-peck basket and put a blanket in it and cleaned me up and put me in that little basket and carried me to the house. My dad would not allow my mother to be taken to the doctor. She didn't want me. He saw me laying there and he said, no, he ain't gonna make it anyway. He had nothing to do with me. I guess from what I hear, he had a rough life. And so it's starting to show up in his life against me. And so he had no care for me at all. And that was hard for my mom, but her mother and her dad took care of me. Well, after I was operated on, my grandpa on my mom's side, I was his buddy. We had what we called a kid wagon, where he would pick kids up and take them to school. And he put them in the back of the wagon and get them covered up, put me beside him. So I started learning different things right away after I got operated on. At that age, I started learning how to milk cows. And then by 5 years old, I knew how to drive horses. And Grandpa would sit under the tree when it's hot, and he said, well, here, you take over, and I know you know what to do, 5 years old. And I just loved farming, I loved horses, and I really enjoyed being my grandpa. Then when I turned 5, we had to move. And then that's when things were going real bad. Anytime Dad come home, he'd be angry about something. I got beat for it. I mean, whipped well, many, many, many times. And I told my mother I didn't want to live here. I want out of here. And the last time he beat me because I did not put the silverware in the drawer right. And he kept beating me, whacking me, and finally my mother says, well, you better quit, you gotta kill him. And he said, no, he ain't bawling. When he starts bawling, I'll quit. I said, well, guess what? I'm not gonna bawl anymore. I will not cry. And that really made him mad. Well, he finally quit. So, the way they found out my problem, my grandpa was able to get me to the doctor, although the doctor came to the house. And that's when I found, my tongue didn't move, my tonsils weren't right, and took care of my mother. But he had no desire of taking me or taking care of my mother and I. And I stayed with Grandpa and my buddy. When he went and took a nap, I went and took a nap. I took a nap with him. Wherever he was, that's where I was until we had to move. And then that's when everything. So the new place we lived, my mother and I took a walk. And there's a farm about 2.5 miles away. And we got that far, and I said, I want to talk to him. She said, why? I said, I want to talk to him. So he come to the door, we met him and told him who we were. And I said, I want to I want to work for you. I want to have something to do. Because I didn't want to be at the house when my dad was there. So at 5 years old, I started working on this farm. You know what mustard is in the field? Anyway, that was my first job, pulling mustard. It's a weed all day. Guess what I got paid? 50 cents. Anyway, it was a hard drive, but he knew my problems. Then when I got just a little bit older, I told my mother I gotta leave. I can't stay here. I couldn't trust my dad. If he wasn't there, it was fine. I could see my mother, but if he wasn't there, then I was in trouble. So I left home. And the farmer says, I'll take care of you. No bedroom. I slept in a haymow. And I slept there many, many times because he had no bedroom for me. But I made out. So when I find out my dad's not home or because he's working or try to keep in contact with my mother, then I would go see her. But if he was there, then I stayed away. I told him I like farming and I'd be glad to work for him. So he said on Saturday you could start, so I work all day on Saturday for 50 cents. And then he says, well, I have here, then when my dad was working, I could see my mother, but if he was working, I couldn't see it. Then the farmer told me when I told him I need to have a place to stay, well, then he told me I could stay, I had to sleep in the haymow. So I had my little bag and whatever was necessary. So as the day went on and several weeks went on, he said, I got a couple other farmers and I'd have you work with them too. I mean, I wasn't afraid of work. And so maybe this week this farmer wanted me for a day or a week or whatever. I would stay there. Then I'd walk back and sleep in the haymow, 2.5 miles. And then whoever wanted me, whatever week, whatever day, I was there. Now, I had to work 2.5, 3 hours every morning before I went to school. And then I walked to school 2.5 miles. And I built a fire in a pot-belly stove and a shovel pad to the outhouses. And the teacher gave me $10 a week. And she was so happy because the schoolhouse would be nice and warm. And I remember I'm only 6, 7 years old then. But I learned real fast. And so she was very happy when I do all that for her. But the walking 2.5 miles back and forth was always keeping me busy. So one day when I was walking back, this car stopped. And here was the pastor of the First Baptist Church in Edinburgh. He said, hey, what can I do for you? He said, you go to church anywhere? And so we sat down and talked in his car and let him know what my life was. He said, well, I'll make sure you can get to church. And he said, we have a youth program where if you learn verses and do this book, we'll send you to camp free. And well, I was all excited about that. I got to go to camp free. Now, I did this every year. But then my heart was burdened for some of the young people that couldn't do that. They tried very hard, and I become known to them. So I would do everything and then ask the youth pastor if he could allow them to go to my place so they could go to camp, and I would stay home. My mother always brought me up Don't be selfish. Share what you have because what you have is what God's given you. And so I've always been willing to give up a lot of stuff in my life, but I wasn't selfish, whatever. This one man, for example, he was 87 years old. I never give $87 to anybody for a birthday present, but God burdened my heart. And he got the check and he called me, he said, Rocky, he said, you made my day. He says, I've been trying to get my funeral bill paid off for a number of years. And he said, that took care of it, right to the penny. We had another couple who came to church, and I happened to be there, and God burdened me to give him $3. That's all I had. When you work for 50 cents a day, that takes a while. That night he'd come back and give his testimony. He said, there's a young man here who gave me $3. If he hadn't done that, I didn't have enough gas to hard get back home. He ended up joining the church. He became a deacon, chief each way to piano, and your kids got saved in our youth program. So that's exciting, just over $3. But he said they couldn't come back if I hadn't done that. So you never know, not with all I had. So my mother taught me, if you can help somebody today, God says, I'll provide your need daily. Now what gets me on that, God provides your need daily, but any day you're putting money away just in case something comes up. So that means you're not trusting God on a rainy day, or if circumstances come up. I'm not knocking anybody for wanting to put money away for that. But we have found that it always works out. I'll tell you a few stories about what happened later. This one here that I think of right away. Sandy had $1,000 in the bank, our daughter, for school. And I needed that money. She paid 3 guys, but I promised that they could work for me. And because I had to go bankrupt through the company I was in, I still said, no, you guys keep right on working. When you're done, I'll pay you at the end of the month. Well, I paid them on a Friday, and Sandy got a check in the mail for $1,000. Now, that's what I bought from her the day before. Boy, that's exciting. But the year after, $1,000. The year after, $1,000. 3 years in a row, we got $1,000 for Sandy and $500 the fourth year. All because I was willing to, well, people say you took that chance. I was willing to do what God wanted me to do. And sometimes we want to hang on because we have that fear. But we've learned down through our years that don't allow that to be in your life. God will provide in His time. So for 11 years, I really was homeless. I knew who I was, I knew where I was sleeping, but that was hard. And I thank the pastor there for picking me up and taking me to the church and getting involved. And my mother was glad for that because I really had no way to do that. So, let's see here. I guess that's a long page. So anyway, anyway, up when I was 15 years old, I did a car accident with the boss, with my first boss. And I ended up in the hospital from February until October. And I never saw my mother all that time, and that was very hard, because my dad would not allow me to see her. But my teacher from school bought me my homework, and the pastor would come and visit once in a while. And so I didn't go to school. When I was able to do my study and take a test, so my 10th and 11th grade, I passed by taking the test and not being going to school. And then after I got out, at the age of 15, when the accident happened, 17, I was out. Because I know I had a birthday. I was 15 when I went out. I was 16 when I got out. Anyway, I had my birthday in there, I guess. Anyway, this girl was going to our church with the pastor's daughter, and she wanted to get married. Well, that's puppy love now that I think about it. But anyway, I felt bad for her because her mother and her didn't get along. The pastor, who was her father, said, yeah, that'd be all right. And I said, okay. So I got a job at GE, and I made money. I made good money. In fact, the boss told me I was the highest paid employee in that building. You know why? Because I worked. What took a guy 3 days to do the deck plate for the locomotive, I was doing in 8 hours and 10 minutes. I took 10 minutes of my time each day for my break, because they have an overhead crane, but you never use your deck plate. And if I waited till the next day, then I might have to sit there a half hour, 3 hours, who knows, in order for my turn. So by doing it this way, they was able to get it done right after I got done, which made it nice. So I done piecework. And he said, you know, you're working people out of a job. I said, no, I'm just doing my best. I ran 2 machines on a railroad track, and the duck plate's in the middle. And so I would drill here, and I was kind of sat over here and make starting holes, you know. So I had each machine doing something different. He said, how do you come up with all that? I said, well, I learned a lot on the farm. Don't waste time. Work gotta be done, it's gotta be done. So anyway, I really made good money. Oh, I was able to buy a trailer, set it all up, piece of ground, drill well, all that. Able to pay cash for all that. For GE, I was making good money. Well, before it was all over with, the mother of this girl, who didn't like me, or didn't get along with her daughter, broke us up. So it ended that. Well, then I could move into my trailer, had a place to live. About 6, 8 months I did that. Then at church I saw my wife come in for the first time. She just started college. I said, wow, there's the girl I want to marry right there. And I asked her for a date, and she said, well, I'm dating somebody else. I said, okay. Well, 5 months later, in that time, that boyfriend that she had then broke up with her. He was in the Army, so he broke up with her. When I found it out, so I asked her for a date again, and she accepted. So we dated 2.5 years before we got married. But I was all set up for it, so that really made it nice. So after we got married, well, our pastor knew that we were interested in working with foster kids. And so we prepared ourselves for foster kids because I know what it is not to have a home. Well, in during that time, I also decided I wanted to work. I was working at a tool and die shop then. But I didn't like how the boss was dealing with it, the way he worked. He was taking advantage of some of his customers, and I shared that with him. And he said, hey, business is business. So I decided to start my own shop. I hired guys out of the jail. They could work all day for me, then they go back to jail. And that worked out well with some of them. But I just felt there were men out there who were qualified, but they were missing them left out because of whatever problems they had. And I was willing to work with them. And the judge was glad to hear that, so that worked out for quite a while. Then I had a partner who wanted to come in with me, so I let him in. For 3.5 years we did real well. Then we took a trip to get more work in California. And I told Mark, I said, I just don't feel comfortable with this. And he said, yeah, everything's fine. So when I got back, his mother-in-law and his wife was running the office and himself. I had no knowledge of how the money was being handled. I got to work in and then I did a chip. That was my job. Well, when we got back, secretary told me somebody wanted to see me. So when I went in, it was IRS. He said, you know, you haven't paid a payroll taxes for over a month. I said, you gotta be kidding me. So I got Mark, and he said, yeah. He said, I thought we could catch it up before you found out about it. Well, he said, if we don't have our money in 7 days, we're shutting you down. Well, they shut me down. So that was very hard. I had 22 guys working for me. And I had to tell them that we were done. So the IRS said, you know, we need to talk about how you get this paid back. So I'm telling them, I'm giving this much to the church, I give this much for our kids who are all in a private school, or 8 of them. And he said, well, you can't do that. You can't put the church money in. I said, well, I'm afraid that man's way of thinking, but God's way of thinking is I will keep my kids in the school and I will pay my tithe. He said, well, I'm just telling you, you gotta pay us back somehow. So he sat down and said, well, I have $750 a month for 10 years. I said, we'll pay it. He said, I don't know how you do it. I said, I don't either. Because it was for school tuition and the tithes, that's a lot. So I'm working at this tool and die shop. They wanted me to come back. Because they were going to quit in the first place. So I went back. Now I want to tell you, every time in 10 years when I had a little problem of meeting the bill, they asked me if I want to work overtime. I never once asked them for anything. the God always time when I needed extra money to take care of our bills. And I did not miss one payment in 10 years. Because they told me if I missed a payment, they would shut me down, sell my house and everything. And it would all work out. It's just amazing when I'm calling my testimony the moment at a time. Because every time the moment comes up, unknown or whatever, God was always there waiting to take care of that problem. So after I got through all that, we started taking foster kids in. The first one was a drill vet. She was running our school district, and her foster parents were moving. So they wanted her to finish school in that school district, which was about 3.5, 4 months, if we would take her so she could continue in that same school. Well, we decided we would try to do that. Boy, what an eye-awakening that was. This girl knew more than most, I can't describe her, because she lived in a hippie camp. And I don't know, some of you probably know what the hippie camp was, where they had people from all different kinds of families living together. And she was educated way beyond what she should have known. But we got through her. When she got out of school, we let her go. And then they asked us if we take her out of drill. Well, we had her ups and downs with her. And I told my wife, no more drills. They done stuff and they said stuff that they want you to hear. But when you're in school, which was not a private school then, why they learn stuff that they shouldn't be learning, but that's the way it is. That's why I don't believe in a public school. I'm not knocking you teachers that work in a public school, but it's not controlled like it should be. I don't think that's what I believe in a private school. More control. Parents want to help make it work too, but today the school board and the parents don't seem to understand that their kids are doing stuff that they shouldn't be doing. They said, oh, my kids would never do that. Well, you know what the world's like. So we worked with foster kids for a number of years. And we enjoyed doing that, I think 16 years, 17 years. So we took in a foster boy. His name was Billy. He was a good boy. His right hand was very deformed. And so we got that taken care of so he could use his hand. And I'll see what happened. The Bear Foundation was able to get a lot of this stuff done. But the parents themselves couldn't get anything done. But they could always get something done, so they helped us take care of that. And Billy, we got his hand fixed. And he was a good boy. He was 15, 16. And in his 11th grade, he took up classes, and in the afternoon he would work. And he liked to do restaurant work and become a manager, so, okay, we'll do that. Well, Dad, he says I don't have a car. Well, Dad bought him a car. He was about 4. And that's me. So that all went well. So while he's in training, the boss called me, his boss says, Billy says he's gonna quit. Oh, put him on the phone. Bill, yes, Dad, get back to work. And I hung up. I didn't say nothing. He didn't quit. He ended up being a manager in 2 different Perkin Pancake restaurants after that, after he did his training over there. Then he met a young lady a few years later, after working in all these restaurants. Well, they fell in love. But the problem is she was carrying some other man's baby. And she told him that she was not going to have that baby if they're going to get married. He said, oh yeah, no, don't do that. Don't have abortion. She said, well, I'm not raising that baby for another man. And we get married. He said, well, will you carry the baby until it's born? And I will adopt it. Now today, Jeremiah is 17 years old. Billy teaching God's way, fine Christian man, and they're really doing great. But he saved that baby's life by begging her not to have an abortion. And she said, well, and he said, then we won't be getting married either. And she said, that's fine. So that's a blessing in itself. He saved a baby's life by helping her through that, even though she didn't want to take on with it. So Billy, we still keep in contact with him. And he wrote us the mother and dad Father's Day card, birthday card, telling how much he loved us and how much we did for him and where he's at today. In fact, he's in worse shape and health than I am. I think he's like 62 years old now. That was our first foster son. Our second foster son, Bobby, he talked to us about taking him in. Would you take somebody in your house that shot their dad? We took Bobby and he shot his dad, but he didn't kill him. They got in a big fight. And so we had nightmares through that, ups and downs, but coming to the Lord. In fact, he wanted to take up college to study and be a youth pastor. So we took him to the college where Pastor Steve went to college over in Ohio there. Dr. Jeremiah was the pastor then. And we got to meet Dr. Jeremiah, but when we opened up the door and walked in, it said, well, from the Nelson family, so they already were prepared for us to come because I called them. But then that really didn't work out for Bobby. He just was struggling. And then he was working at a Perkin Pancake House, same place that Billy was. And the other man owed him some money. And the man wouldn't pay him. So Billy went to his house and he saw a gun rack there and he grabbed one of the guns. He said, no, you ain't gonna shoot me. He said, no. He said, I'm taking this gun with me. And when you pay me, I'll give you your gun back. When he walked out. The next day, a knock come on my door. It was the cops. He said, hey, you have a son named Bobby? I said, yes. Know anything about a gun? I said, yes. You have it? I said, no. Well, what happened? I said, well, he wanted me to buy it, but I told him I really didn't need it and I didn't have the money anyway. They said, you're a very fortunate man. I said, why is that? They said, if you would have bought that gun, I'd be taking you to jail for buying stolen property. Now, what about that? Well, boy, that was a relief because that's what they told me. But anyway, Bobby had to go to jail because of it. You really mean a mother. Tell me how much you love us and what we've done for him. And he says, and that was the end of his letter. He did not finish it. He died. God took him home. He had a heart attack. You just never know how much you do for these kids. Anyway, I had to have a funeral for him too. Nobody loved him, nobody cared for him. And they asked me if I would have a funeral, so I had to go through that. And then we got another boy, I got one more. His name was Gordon. He got out of high school, he went over the Army, so he joined the Army. He come out all shot up in the hospital, in a wheelchair. And he had to struggle for a few years over that. When he come to know the Lord, why we had him. When he passed away through his injuries. But yet, you never know. So we ended up, Wade was the last one, and we did a phone call. We want you to come to Kentucky to be house parents. We talked to those for Bear Foundation, they thought that'd be a good move. So, we go to Kentucky, and we talked over. I said, well, if I sell my house when we get home, it means God wants us to move in. Within a couple of weeks, I had our house sold. Now, the place that wanted us didn't want us until June. The people that wanted the house didn't want it until June. And I was working at Coronation then, and I had 20 years at June. So everything was ending up with June was the day was best because of all these other things happening. Well, that was in October when we went down. Then in December we went there for around Christmas time and talked it over. And I know there was a sister and a brother, they were not allowed to be together because of circumstances where they were trying to say they had. I said, well, playtime and eating time. Well, we put one rotten apple in a basket, then they all turn it rotten. I said, well, we're not working with apples, we're working with people. Well, if you got something you think might work, maybe we'll give you a try. So in February, there's a letter saying, we don't want you to come. So I go to the people who wanted to buy the house. See, they're getting married in June, that's why they want to wait until June, but they wanted the house now, so make sure, because they wanted my house pretty bad. So we got to start looking for a house. Because they said, no, we don't want it, we want the house. Well, we couldn't find her other house, Finally, about 3 weeks before, we finally found a house. But then, the bank called me and said, there's a lien against the house. And this person's not living, or we know, the neighbor said he died. Now you gotta find his tombstone. But you gotta be kidding me. So my neighbor there, we walked for miles in different places, and finally we found it. So they accepted that. Now we're running out of time. So I told the people that I was buying a house, want to buy the house off of, but we can't get the money in time. But would you, if I paid you rent, and the rent is yours free over and above what you want for the house, it's all yours, I don't want it back. And so that's free money for you. It might be a month, might be 6 months, I don't know. Well, anyway, they agreed to that. So 2 days before it's time for them to leave, the bank called me. They said, we need to talk to you. When I got there, they said, well, we know who you are, we checked you out. You're not going to go nowhere. We know where you'll be living there and all that. And I said, well, yeah, what are you trying to tell me? Well, all this stuff's got to be done yet, surveying and all, checking this and that. Or to continue that. Well, here's your check to pay for the house. I said, wow. I didn't end up having to pay any rent. I paid the guys for the house. So I don't know, 3 or 4 months later before they find out all the paperwork done. But God worked all that out because that's the way it was. So that's one of the moments that we had to go through for getting our house. Let's see. So I guess we go to, my wife and I've been married. We took in 5 more kids after Corey was gone for a while. Now the reason this happened, the place we were living at, in the first place, we don't want to accept one person outside of being a relative, meaning we could not take kids anymore. So we needed to get out of that house and get in the house we just got in order to continue to work with these kids. So God had that whole plan all the way around. We had to go like that through all that for us, because I would not have moved out of that house that we were living in. But because the township passed a law because of the hippie situation, they ain't trying to get families not to live together 3 or 4 at a time. You couldn't have anybody. Like if my mother-in-law and father-in-law had to live with us, one of them, we couldn't take both of them because there's 2. Anyway, the new house was available to do whatever we wanted to do. You know, we had 5 or 6 bedrooms, and it was a nice place. It's amazing how we had to go through all that in order to make us move. So anyway, we got these 5 kids, and they were foster kids. Well, the grandmother couldn't handle them, that's why we ended up getting them. But then a year later or so, Foundation told them that they would have to start adopting them out in different places. Oh no, I don't want to break them up, I don't want to break them up. And finally they talked to the grandmother and said, will you please take them all? I don't know. Well, we ended up having to change all the names, change the birth certificate, or all that paperwork. And we ended up adopting all 5 of them. It was 3 girls and 2 boys. And we ended up at that same time, my son was in 10th grade. He was a son. He said, Dad, the public school, I just can't keep going there. I said, well, what's the problem? So we talked it over. He said, I know where's a Christian school that I could go to, and I have a friend I could stay with. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. Let's check this out. So I checked it out. I never heard of a Christian school before. Well, anyway, they told me it's $1,200 a month. You put your kids in school at that time. That's half price because they wanted to hire my wife to be a teacher also. And they paid half of that. So $1,200 a month plus other 12 would have been 24, but they, since he's getting a job there, so that worked out. Well, we got to move again. And that wasn't hard to do. We found a house right away and moved. And I couldn't sell my other house. It sat there for a year. Finally, I sold it. But anyway, I had the kids on the Christian school, and my wife was teaching there, so that was all working out fine. And we adopted them all the paperwork and go through all that. So we had ups and downs with adopted kids, but the 2 boys were in trouble all the time. State cops knew what we were or did down on 111. State cop was at our place. They ran away, they stole something, or they did something. Anyway, we struggled through that for a while. And now we come to the point where our health is starting to go down. And now, no, I'll have to back up a little bit. Oh, my kids come to me. I have the adopted kids were all on their own. Dad, we need help in mail, and that's where he was working. To be a maintenance man or janitor and all that. And you gotta quit working. You just work. I'm working on the farm. I mean, I had 6, 7 jobs, part-time jobs helping people because I just helping everybody. I said, okay. So I went down to that school in Maryland, talked to the man in charge. He said, yes, your son said, you're the man we need, so we interested in coming. I said, okay. Give me this piece of paper, and I said, what's that? Well, it's a contract you gotta sign, you know, teachers all sign a contract, and the workers. And I said, well, let me see that. He gave it to me, and I tore it right up. I didn't even look at it. Because I knew probably I don't know how much you wanted to pay me to. And I said, he said, what are you doing? I said, I come here to do a job if that's what God wants me. I didn't come here for a piece of paper. He said, I will not sign a contract. Well, how much money do you think you need? I said, oh, I'll work 30 days. If you're not happy with me, you pay me then. But right now, no. Anyway, 30 days later, I got a nice paycheck. And I was happy with that. But I got to back up a little bit. That tomb that I saw, when I was at Coronation, before that,
How many more pages do you have?
Well, I'll quit soon. Before that,
We have people waiting to come in, so
okay. Well, Carnation, I've been on a job and the younger guy I wasn't qualified. So I wouldn't accept. And then they said they wanted me to train him, and I said, well, I'm not qualified. So anyway, I started looking for a job, and that's how I got the job at the school. And I did the same thing with Carnation. I started the tool and die shop. I worked 30 days with no pay to prove myself, and then they were happy with me. He said, well, how much we got to pay you now? And give me a piece of paper, and the number I had on the paper matched the same number that he gave me, and I asked him over too. So anyway, well, I thank you. I can't discuss what happened, but I come and going through all we're going through now, but God taking care of us. And appreciate your time. And I know I had some rough moments, but that's all right. God put me around me to come through each one of them. So I love you all in the Lord. Good to see you all. And, I can't believe how time fast.
Well, let's pray for Rocky and Phyllis. Lord, we are so thankful for the faithfulness of these two servants. We thank you that you've brought them into our life and that we've had the privilege of knowing them all these years. And Lord, we just commit them to you, ask you to bless them, continue to use them, and we thank you for their hearts. May our hearts be as dedicated to you as they have been. And just guide us through the remainder of this day. Bring glory and honor to yourself through each of us. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you, Rocky. We appreciate it.